This week on Africa Weekly, we focus on Nigeria, where the fertility business is booming despite being considered taboo. And we travel to the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, which is pursuing modern architecture, often at the expense of its ancient heritage. But first, a summary of the stories that made the headlines this week. At least 52 people were killed after two boats carrying migrants to Yemen from Djibouti sank on Tuesday. The sinking of the vessels, which survivors say were carrying Ethiopians, is the latest tragedy to occur on the risky route used by African migrants seeking work in the Middle East. In recent years, Djibouti has become a transit point for migrants heading to the Arabian Peninsula in search of work, with the Obok region serving as a hub. This migration continues even though Yemen is facing one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. More than 50 mass graves have been identified in Western Democratic Republic of Congo after a spate of killings in the region. The announcement came after a joint fact-finding mission between a UN rights group and local authorities. An investigation is underway following the discovery. Earlier this month, the UN said that at least 890 people were killed during 3 days of intercommunal clashes in the region last December. The violence appears to have been rooted in a long-standing rivalry between the Banunu and Batende ethnic groups. And also in the DRC this week, Parliament held its opening session on Monday after a bitterly fought election that ushered in a new opposition president but left the National Assembly dominated by supporters of former leader Joseph Kabila. The session opened just 4 days after Félix Tshisekedi was sworn in as president of Sub-Saharan Africa's largest country, replacing Kabila, who had ruled the country since 2001. Two people suffered light injuries in an explosion in central Nairobi on Saturday. A regional police commander said a roadside vendor was given a small box to transport in his cart by a Somali gentleman, which exploded. The Somali pretended he had forgotten his identity papers and told the vendor he was fetching them and left. That is when the blast took place, near a restaurant and a bus station. The incident happened almost 2 weeks after a jihadist attack left 21 people dead in the Kenyan capital, which was claimed by Islamist militants. And on Tuesday, one suspect was acquitted after standing in the 2015 Kenyan Garissa University attack trial, with 4 others still set to present a defense. The assault, which was claimed by Somalia's Al-Qaeda-linked Shabab insurgents, left 148 people dead. It was the deadliest attack Kenya had seen since the 1998 bombing of the US Embassy in Nairobi. 4 gunmen involved in the massacre were killed, but 5 others were prosecuted for terrorism and conspiracy to commit an attack, with 22 witnesses testifying. Their trial will continue at the end of March. Algeria's main Islamist party, the Movement for the Society of Peace, announced on Saturday that it has decided to take part in April's presidential election. Presenting itself as Islamist and moderate, the MSP had supported incumbent President Abdelaziz Bouteflika in a governing alliance, before going its own way in 2012.
The president of the movement, Abderrazak Makri, is going to be the candidate for national consensus, the candidate for uniting the voice of Algerians, to research solutions for Algerians and the economic and social vision that Algerians are united around, in order to protect our country from the great dangers that threaten it.
81-year-old Bouteflika, who now uses a wheelchair and has rarely been seen in public since a stroke in 2013, is due to complete a 4th term in office at the end of April. Despite his advanced age and poor health, some of Bouteflika's supporters have called for him to stand for a 5th term. A traditional dhow sailing boat made entirely of trash and flip-flops set off along the Kenyan coast on Sunday on the 4th leg of its 500-kilometre expedition to raise awareness about the harmful effects of plastic waste. Dhows are an icon on the Kenyan coast, having travelled across the waters of the Indian Ocean for around 2,000 years. The journey of the one-of-a-kind dhow, dubbed the Flip-Floppy, began on Lamu Island on Thursday and is set to finish in Zanzibar on February 6th.
Every morning, Toyin gets her children ready for school. They are like any other children, except they were born with the help of a surrogate mother in India. Toyin's 12-year struggle with uterine fibroids led her to turn to surrogacy. She has now opened an agency in Lagos to help other couples struggling to conceive by using surrogate mothers in Nigeria.
Surrogacy is in Nigeria, and once you do it legally, you sign necessary papers, you get a lawyer, you get an agency like ours, we put you through the process, you are safe. And then at the end of the day, when the surrogate gives birth, the hospital hands over the baby to you directly.
In Nigeria, there are no laws surrounding surrogacy. It is neither authorised nor prohibited. As a surrogate mother, Ada was given nearly €5,000 and accommodation during her pregnancy. At the time, her family had been under threat of eviction from their apartment, and Ada's husband decided to accept the arrangement.
I almost gave my life for us to live where we were, because as at that moment, the courts were coming to drive families out of their houses and put their properties on the streets, and I didn't want to even think of that.
A deeply spiritual and conservative country, surrogacy is frowned upon by Nigeria's evangelical Christians and imams. And as for infertility, it is perceived as a divine punishment.
The numbers in the last 2 years have really gone up. And we have not only people who are resident in Nigeria, we have a lot of requests from Europe, Nigerians particularly living in Europe, Nigerians living in the United States.
Despite the fertility business booming, it remains taboo. But not every family has the means to access surrogacy or IVF. Instead, they have fewer options, with many turning to adoption or to baby factories, where illegal maternity wards put unwanted children up for adoption.
Berhanu's house has been in his family for 7 generations. It's a cherished possession, especially as it's one of few houses from the Ethiopian Empire era that are still standing.
These days, most constructions that you see are more along the lines of European architecture. The city shouldn't neglect its history.
Addis Ababa was founded in the late 19th century by Emperor Menelik II. Houses like Berhanu's were home to important figures from the ruling classes of the time. At the moment, the capital's skyline is changing, often to the detriment of older dwellings. Tadesh will soon have to leave her house to make way for a modern development.
We're waiting for the government to do an evaluation of the house and give us some compensation. I would have preferred to stay here. It's my father's house.
A handful of historic buildings have been restored with the help of the government, but many view these restorations as needlessly costly, preferring to tear down and start over.
And so on. I mean, there are isolated efforts of protecting, saving historic buildings, but it's really very limited. It's very limited. It is not even a given that you should protect a historic building.
The Ethiopian government has listed 440 buildings as heritage sites. The majority of them are in a state of advanced disrepair due to a lack of upkeep.
Musicians in Zimbabwe gathered in the capital on Saturday to celebrate the life of Afro jazz star Oliver Tuku Dukudzi. His iconic work, dubbed Tuku music, was a mixture of ethnic styles. On Thursday, Zimbabwean President Emerson Mnangagwa declared him a national hero, only the second non-politician to be granted the status. Mtukudzi died on January 23rd at the age of 66. South Africa clinched the 5-match series by 3-2 in Cape Town on Wednesday after beating Pakistan 7 wickets in the 5th one-day international at Newlands. The series was marred by the banning of the Pakistani captain by the ACC for racial slurs against one of the South African players. That's all from us at Africa Weekly. Until next week.